Welcome to the Build Your Perfect College List program. This is Module 2, Academic Fit Factors. In Module 1, we discussed the financial fit factors, and in that capacity, we talked about financial aid in two different perspectives. One was to make sure that you understand how financial aid works, so you can make sure that the colleges your student applies to are affordable when all is said and done. In addition, even if financial aid is not a driving factor for you and your family, we believe that the better educated you can be relative to financial aid, how financial aid is calculated, your potential eligibility, as well as how colleges look at financial aid, will help you to be an educated consumer and potentially save you thousands of dollars. Here in Module 2, we're going to talk about academic fit factors, but we also are going to look at it from two perspectives. Perspective number one is the obvious. Are the schools your student is applying to the types of schools that your student will actually get accepted to? In addition, though, we also want to talk about academic fit factors from a reasonable but also specific perspective to make sure that the academic environment that your student is considering and will eventually at some point attend is the type of environment where they will thrive, where they will be challenged but not overwhelmed, where they will be set up for future happiness and future success. Module 2 goals, we want to help you to identify and understand your students' academic fit factors. The key there is your students' academic fit factors. In addition, as I just said, we would like to make sure that we understand how your academic fit factors and evaluation of your student applies and may impact the colleges they are looking to apply to from an acceptance perspective. What's a reach, what's a match, and what is a safety? But in addition, we want to do a deeper dive and do more research and understand the academic environment that your student is considering to make sure that, again, they're in the position to achieve academic success. And you'll find a theme throughout the first three modules for sure. We want to make sure that you're having and you're encouraging family conversation about the criteria that you, your family, and your student need to use or want to use when you're putting your perfect college list together. Now, over the years, we've seen many, many different types of mistakes being made, but these are the top 5 mistakes that we have seen parents and families and students make that we'd like to address and try to help you avoid. Number 1, applying to colleges that are much more selective than anticipated. And what we mean by that is there are a lot of great schools out there. However, a lot of times students and families will underestimate the competitiveness of different schools because they're not taking into consideration all the criteria or all the factors that go into the admission process for that given school. In addition, many, many families and students use ratings and rankings only to create your college list. Now, we are not saying that ratings and rankings serve no purpose. However, we do feel that in many cases, rating and rankings are highly overrated. So we're going to talk about how to use ratings and rankings at a starting point, but also give you ideas on how you can do a deeper dive into the colleges that your student is thinking about, as well as finding others that are a great match based on the criteria that you develop. Number 3, letting bumper sticker envy drive your college list creation. We talked about this in Module 1 as well. Bumper sticker envy is applying to schools that families or students think have a great reputation and are well known by others. Now, there's nothing wrong with applying to those types of schools if you've done your homework and they match your other criteria, whether it be financial, academic, or non-academic, as we're going to talk about in Module 3. However, using bumper sticker envy alone as a driving force to put a list together can really be misleading and not be optimal for the results that you want to achieve. Number 4, and this is a very big mistake, especially made by students, they underestimate the rigor of college level work. Oftentimes, students will say, as they're putting a list together, I don't want to go to that school. And when you ask them why, they say that's not a good school. And most of the time, when you ask them how they came to that conclusion, there's usually 2 answers. One answer is they went online and they saw a very high acceptance rate, and therefore they think the school is below them. But another reason and rationale that a lot of students use is they know somebody who's going to that school and they think that they are smarter than that person, and therefore they think that they're above the school or better than that school. Now, I'm not going to get into the thought process of a teenager. Some parents also tend to feel those things as well. And if that is the way you feel, that is your prerogative. However, it's very, very important for students to understand that college is not high school. And that sounds obvious, but there's no squishy homework grade or class participation grade or notebook grade when you're in college. It's all about tests most of the time. It could be a group project, but college level work at every college is rigorous and challenging. The question is, how rigorous and how challenging do you want the classes to be that your student is going to have to take? Using the student's potential major as a key driver. Now, this might sound counterintuitive, but this is very much along the same line as using ratings and rankings. The fact of the matter is that approximately 81% of college freshmen change their major at least once freshman year. There's nothing wrong with that. If you're a parent listening to this, did you know what you wanted to do when you were 18 years old? If you did, and that's what you're doing now, and you're happy and successful, then wow, good for you. But you are by far the exception. So when it comes to identifying majors or possible career paths, we agree that there's some homework to be done and it deserves some time and attention. However, we also find that way too many families and students put too much pressure on themselves to try to understand and force a major or career upon the student without them truly understanding what's the best fit for them, or in reality, what a person with that major really does in the real world. So therefore, using a major as a driving force could be important for certain majors, and we will discuss that. But in general, find the school that's the best match for your student and an environment that's going to be embracing and supportive to let them find their passion and have them go at it 100%. So what are the academic fit factors and how should they fall in line relative to putting your perfect college list together? So in the first perspective, we're talking about measuring your student's ability to get admitted. That's obvious, right? So we need to identify, is the college a reach, a match, or a safety? Now, there's ways to define that, which we will save for the end, because if you're curious of how to do that, we're going to give you some parameters that we use that you can feel free to apply as well. We want you to create a list that is balanced and realistic. And in general, what we suggest are 3 reaches, 6 matches, and 3 safeties for a total of 12 schools. Now, students tend to apply to more and more schools these days. We don't believe there's really any need to apply more than 12 if you've gone through the process correctly and you know what to expect. However, that is obviously your prerogative. In addition, you can apply to less schools. But if you're going to do so, you want to make sure that your worst case scenario is pretty spot on and acceptable for you, your family, and your student from an academic, financial, and other factor perspective. You want to measure your student's GPA against the GPAs and the rigor of classes taken and the test scores of that specific college, and we're going to show you how to do that. You want to remember that there are other factors such as essays, letters of rec, activities, potentially athletics, but you need to be careful not to put too much emphasis on these other factors, because at the end of the day, no matter what admissions people may tell you about looking at the whole student, most of the time, colleges will look at the GPA, the types of classes that are taken, and standardized test scores, if they apply, as the first cut to decide whether or not a student is a yes, a no, or a maybe for acceptance. Then you want to validate your matching criteria against multiple sources and with the colleges. We'll show you 2 ways to do that today, but also as we go through the data sources, which is in Module 4, you'll learn more about how to do it with additional resources. Little bit of a caveat here. Remember, regardless of your student's achievements, whether your student is considered in your mind outstanding, average, or there are some students that currently are below average, there are great colleges for everyone. Students mature at different rates. The college process is not a sprint, it is a marathon. There's no prize for getting somewhere first. And as the license plate on this car shows, somebody who had a 2.7 GPA could be incredibly successful. So please understand that the current standing of where your student is today doesn't mean that that's where they will be in their future. And that's why, again, it is up to them with your help to put the perfect college list together to put them in a position for their greatest success. On the other end, we want to find the right academic environment. And yes, academic offerings are important. However, as we just stated and discussed, up to 81% of college freshmen change their major at least once freshman year. So definitely there could be some career exploration that takes place, assessments that are taken. However, I wouldn't expect that that's going to be 100% accurate. Where a major or career might be important is if it's a very specific major. For example, if your child is thinking about engineering, architecture, physical therapy, nursing, majors such as this require the school to actually offer those majors, correct? So therefore, in that instance, if your child has a very specific major in mind that they're thinking about pursuing, obviously you want to use that as a criteria for identifying the schools that might be a good match for your student. Anything outside of that, or if your student is undecided, which by the way is fine, 68% of students go into college undecided. That is not a problem whatsoever. So please don't feel stressed if your student doesn't know what they want to do. In the right academic environment, the goal is that they find what they want to do. They find their passion and they go forward from there. We've talked about reputation, ratings, and rankings, but watch this one because it depends on what the rating ranking source is. It's all about the small type, meaning how the study was put together. Most people don't read the small type. And again, from our perspective, if you don't know where to start, but you think your child has interest in a specific major or geography or type or size of school or state, you can absolutely do searches of ratings and rankings based on that criteria. However, we would not recommend using that alone as the driving force for putting your college list together. That should be a starting point so you can find the characteristics of those colleges and then try to find other colleges with similar characteristics minus the ratings and rankings. Competitiveness. And this is very important, not just from an ability to get admitted, but it's also the academic temperature of the campus and of the community. Are peers competitive? Is the workload overwhelming? Is the competition for internships and maybe honors programs intense? And can your student handle it? For those of you who have students with any kind of need for academic support, many colleges offer academic support in various forms. Personally, there's no reason, if you think that that's an important component of setting up your student for future success, there's no reason not to talk to somebody in those departments, ask specific questions, and I can assure you that that does not impact your student's ability to get admitted. Internship availability and opportunities are very important. Most colleges, because of the cost of college, will talk about internships in some capacity. And that's great if they say they're available. However, you want to understand not that they're just available, but how competitive they are relative to the number of students applying and then actually receiving the internship. You also want to find out and understand of the percent of students who have an internship, what percent is directly attributed to the efforts and the contacts and the process of the college versus what percent is all happening because the student took the initiative and did things on their own. Sink or swim. Is the environment a learning and developing and growth type environment, or is there potential for the student to be overwhelmed and stressed? And then again, we ask that you please don't let bumper sticker envy drive the college bus based on perceptions. College is challenging. College can be hard. It's a transition, not just academically, but it's also a transition socially. So the better we match the academic criteria, as well as in Module 3, we'll talk about the non-academic criteria to meet the personality, the ability, the strengths of your student, the better position they're going to be in for future success. So we get asked all the time, why is college so much different and so much harder than when I went to school? Well, we're going to try to explain that to you. Currently, the number of colleges has not changed. As a matter of fact, there's actually many schools, mostly smaller and rural schools. However, there are many schools that are very, very close to financial ruin. Therefore, there's even less colleges potentially in the future, but more students looking to apply to those spots. In addition, GPAs and ACT/SAT scores are increasing and inflated year over year. And that's not to say that they're artificially inflated or increasing. We will not get into that conversation during this program. However, GPAs and standardized test scores, achievements from an academic perspective, are higher than they've ever been. And therefore, more and more schools are receiving high-end candidates applying to their school, and therefore make the admissions rates more and more difficult to comprehend. Every year, the graduation rate for high school graduates is around 3 million, 2.7 to 3 million typically. But every year, more and more students are also applying to more and more schools. If you're a parent listening to this, you may remember going through the process and applying to 2, maybe 4 schools, maybe not even seeing them. Nowadays, that's not really the case. Many students apply to a minimum of 7 to 12 schools, and therefore the competition again gets more and more intense. In addition, the expectation nowadays is that when you graduate high school in this country, you go to college. Yes, there are technical schools. Yes, there are alternative avenues that you can take. However, for a majority of our population, the expectation is that the student go to college, which is very different from years ago. Therefore, again, there are more and more students applying to the same schools, which increases competition. And lastly, for those people who are in the United States, every year there tend to be more and more international students, and they compete for the same spots that your student would, and therefore make it more and more competitive. So let's talk about how college admissions really works. It's science? Well, it might be, but if it is, it's a science very specific to the college that's not publicly known. So it's a very subjective process. You'd like to think that college offices actually are a meritocracy. They admit the quote unquote best. However, as the quotes insinuate, best is subjective. The way a specific college may define best could be different for another specific college, and that's where the uncertainty comes in. Colleges also do admit students based on other objectives. There could be a lot of different things. It could be geography. It could be based on athletics. It could be in-state versus out-of-state. It could be based to fill a program or a major or a marching band. There's a lot of different things that colleges make exceptions for. So there's no one formula or no one rule that's publicized by a college. It's kind of their, if you will, secret sauce. So therefore, the result is 3 different application processes. One for what I'll call the regular applicants. Another is for special applicants. And then even another is for targeted. And targeted and special depend and could be any of the categories I mentioned before, such as sports, such as geography, such as in-state, out-of-state, and so on. And obviously, this is where the confusion increases and the predictability decreases, which can really lead to admissions disappointment and frustration if you're not doing what we're trying to teach you to do with this program. What we're wanting you to do with this program is do a deeper dive as to the criteria that's important for you, your student, and your family, and then verify and validate that criteria at the colleges that your student is applying to so you can minimize the confusion, disappointment, and frustration and increase the probability. So what can we do? First off, we need to gain the proper perspective. When you're among a great many who consider attending a competitive or selective school, and by the way, again, competitive or selective school comes at every levels. We are not just talking about the most competitive or the most selective, such as the Ivy Leagues. Competitive and selective colleges are at every GPA level and every ACT, SAT level. But it pays to know how to compare your student versus the way the college actually evaluates applicants. Competitive and selective colleges, again, are at all levels and all locations, not just the highest ranked, and not just colleges with the lowest admissions rates. Very important, worth pointing out again. There are a lot of great colleges out there, and taking you through this program is hopefully going to help you to identify them. But the knowledge of understanding how colleges evaluate students and where your student is relative to the colleges they're interested in should help you in a couple ways. First off, it should help to prepare them both inside and outside of the classroom if you have time, and this depends on what year your student is. Obviously, if your student is a 9th or 10th grader, you have more time to do this type of planning than you would if your student is a junior. However, relative to the types of courses your child takes, the grades that they need to get, as well as test scores, understanding where they are relative to the colleges they're interested in can help you do future planning. In addition, it can obviously help you create a realistic list, and therefore it will help you identify colleges that are best for your students' future success. This is going to sound a little crazy, folks, I will tell you, but believe it or not, getting admitted is not the goal. You're asking me why, right? Well, this is why. As we talked about before, the environment is important, the affordability is important, and college is hard. Every class is challenging. No one is watching. Your child needs to be great at self-regulation and be their own best advocate. They need to be very good at time management. They may have a lot more time on their hands than they did before when they were in high school, and all those types of things. Those personal things as well as academic things all need to be balanced to make sure that they're in the right environment. And going through this module is going to help you tip the scale in your students' favor. Transfer and dropout rates are really scary, but depending on what studies you look at, it's anywhere between 31% and 50% nationally. Those are crazy high numbers. Nobody goes through this process saying, I can't wait to transfer next year, or I can't wait to drop out. That's not why you go through this process. However, the reality versus the perception tends to be different, which is why, again, we're putting so much emphasis on trying to help you to utilize the right criteria to match your child and the colleges they're interested in. So that way they do not end up in one of those statistics. Students oftentimes, they go for what they call or what they think is the best school, again, based not on the criteria we're trying to teach you to utilize, but on other criteria. And therefore, they often find out when it's too late, they're in the wrong environment. Searching for help on campus is critical early on, but also searching for help, as you did with this program, is critical to try to ensure that you're putting your student in position for future college success and happiness. So, when considering your academic fit factors, we have a couple of tips. Understand acceptance rates beyond Google, and we'll talk about that in a second. Don't equate low acceptance rates with a better school. It may be the case. You may feel that, and if that's the way you feel, that's your prerogative, but don't omit schools that are a great match for your student on all the rest of your criteria just because you believe their acceptance rates aren't what they should be. Include enough match and safety schools in addition to the reach schools. I will find that one of the biggest mistakes families make is filling the reach bucket, often to where it overflows, and not spending enough time on finding good quality match and safety schools. And that can set your student up and your family up for future college admissions disappointment. Consider the learning environment. Is there help? Is there academic advising to help your student find their passion and pursue the major that they just learned about? Is the learning environment ideal for your student? Everything from class size to competitiveness, as we discussed before. And can your student thrive, not just survive, in the college environment based on the criteria you've identified and validating that criteria with your research? I don't need to tell you if you're a parent, and I certainly don't need to tell you if you're a student, that there's a lot of pressure on students when they're considering colleges. Students don't want to disappoint their parents or their high school friends. They think that they're being judged, which most of the time, unfortunately, they probably are, based on the names of schools that they use and share with their friends and family. Parents, you know your support is critical, and we are not in any way, shape, or form trying to tell you how to parent your child. However, as we've said, one of the major themes that we've tried to emphasize throughout this whole program is a happy child is a successful child. And as a parent myself, if I could sign on the dotted line now to know that my daughter was going to be successful and happy, I would do it right now. And I wouldn't care what the bumper sticker was. I wouldn't care where she was going to school. I would just have total satisfaction knowing that that could be a fact. Helping your student pursue their passion is key. Unfortunately, studies have shown that many parents often mistakenly equal their ability as a parent to the college their child attends. Please don't fall into this trap. Brand name can be awesome, can be great, but it doesn't guarantee future success. And it doesn't make them immune to the normal life dynamics that we all have to face in our day-to-day lives. So again, making sure they're in the right environment is key. So we have some homework. It may feel like there's a lot to do, but we're going to break down 2 things before we go into the worksheets and a couple of other things for you. First off, relative to the worksheets, please print them out if you haven't already and start going through them and identifying the academic criteria that is most important for your student to be successful. Then, once you find some colleges that you think might be a good choice, evaluate them based on your student's ability to get admitted, whether a reach, match, or safety, and there's more on that in a moment, but also whether it's an ideal environment for them to thrive versus survive. This is key and very important. Try to evaluate your student without bias. As parents, we all tend to feel that our child is fantastic, and they all are. However, there are a lot of very strong candidates at every school your child is applying to. So therefore, you have to be as open as you can to the strengths and the weaknesses of your student, especially matching them to the colleges they're interested in. So that way you have an honest position of where your child is from an admissibility perspective. Look at the demographics of the incoming class. I have a document I'm going to share with you in a minute, show you what I mean, and measure your student against those. Identify gaps as well as your potential to fill the gaps. And by the way, some gaps you may have time to fill. Some gaps may just not get filled at all. That's okay. Your student can still apply, but you need to just understand that that would mean the school is a reach. Go in eyes wide open with that understanding, managing your students and your expectations. To that end, discuss the findings with your family and with your students so everyone's on the same page. Encourage your child to apply to reaches if you want them to. That's fine. And reaches, again, are at all academic levels. But make sure you have the safety schools solidified so you have your worst case scenario is actually a very positive, good scenario. And throughout the modules, we continue to talk also about the importance of speaking and verifying and confirming your research findings with admissions offices, as well as students who are currently attending the colleges your child's interested in before they apply, not after. Yes, after they get accepted, you will be able to go to an accepted student day, and you should do it there as well. However, leading up to the application process, as many students and as many interactions you can have with the admissions office, with different departments, to understand what life is like and how competitive that school is a good thing to confirm the research that you're doing with this program. Now, some additional guidance and tips, because all the time we get asked, the reach match safety thing I've heard of, but I really don't understand it. So this is just one perspective of a definition of the reach, match, and safeties. A reach is where your student is in the 50th percentile or lower when it comes to GPA and or standardized test scores. And I say and or not because it's one or the other per se, but some schools are going SAT optional or are SAT optional. You can find a full list of the SAT optional schools at fairtest.org. Again, that's fairtest.org. But when you're trying to identify, at least at this point, whether a school is a reach, match, or safety, you need to go by the GPA and the standardized test scores that are published by that specific school. So if your child is in the 50th percentile or lower compared to the average or the range that they share, that school would be a reach. If your student is in the 50th to 75th percentile, meaning they're a better match, they're higher on the scale that is shared by the college, that would be a match school. And then if your student is the 75th percentile or higher, that means they're a very strong match for the college that they're interested in, and that there's a very good probability that they will get admitted. Therefore, it would be a safety. There are other impacts that we talked about, such as major, essays, and other factors. However, again, the leading force typically is GPA and the types of courses your student is taking, as well as test scores where it is applicable. Before we leave that topic, the major your student selects can be very important. So when you look online, it is very important to try to look not just at general admission numbers that apply to every student, but try to get major specific information and to see if the acceptance probability increases or decreases based on that major. And many times you may have to actually talk to admissions about that. This is obviously for a student who thinks they know what they want to do and study in college. If you're undecided, it still helps to know this. So if you have to guess or you have to just pick one, you don't pick the wrong one. Look for college-specific information, such as their freshman profile. We're going to go through one in a second. And list your criteria and then ask pointed questions of admissions, students, dean of departments, career placement, special services, academic support services, any of those places that are important to make sure that whatever findings you have created or developed or found are validated and confirmed. And then don't forget things such as early decision and other factors such as in-state and out-of-state makeup of the community. Early decision and in-state and out-of-state makeup of a college and school could have a significant impact and make it much more difficult or potentially easier for a student to get admitted. So you need to understand these factors. You should discuss it with admissions and understand how they impact the reach, match, and safety definition that you have classified your student in. So with that, we're going to go to the worksheet. This is the worksheet. We're not going to go through the whole thing, but this is just an example of what you can do. You can obviously create your own document, but what we want to do here is just to have you start thinking about and having the conversation on a per school basis, what the major might be for your student if they're thinking about one, and more specifically, what the admissions requirements may be. This is GPA, this is ACT, SAT, this could be the number of advanced classes, this could be a bunch of different things, and we're going to show you a way to get a feel for that. But also, obviously, having discussions with admissions is very key to clarify and verify these things. In addition, list the strengths and weaknesses of your student. Be honest. You want your student to be able to find colleges that exemplify their strengths. And that's fine. They can be challenged in some of their weaknesses, but we want them to be challenged and develop them, not be overwhelmed. So doing that inventory is very helpful to make sure that you're looking at the right criteria. And then you can match the schools to your criteria. And again, this is just an example. And what we suggest is that you use a scale of 1 to 4 and rate each school based on each leading attribute that you determine most important. We say 1 to 4 because that way, if you're in the middle and you're not sure, you or your student and your family will have to choose either 2 out of 4 or 3 out of 4, rather than just picking the one in the middle if you were to use a scale of 1 to 3 or 1 to 5. Once you rate each school on each attribute and each criteria, obviously you can add them together, and that might be a good indication of which schools are a better match for your student versus not. At the end, as with all of our worksheets, we would like you to look at the questions. Your answer should be yes to most of these, or you should understand how the no's apply to your college list and to your student, and be very cognizant of that and try to find more information in those categories before you finalize your student's college list. We also talked about the freshman profile. And the way I found this one was I went to Google and I just Googled freshman profile for a specific school. And this happens to be for Bucknell University, located in Pennsylvania. The 2020 class profile is the incoming class, so it's for the high school graduation class of 2019. This document I find is very helpful because it gives you some great information as to the number of applicants they've received, the number they admitted, and then the number that actually were enrolled. And all these figures are very important to understand the selectivity and competitiveness of the school before your student applies. Obviously, regardless of the admission rate, the number enrolled is very important because obviously that indicates whether or not there are a lot of incoming freshman spots available or whether a lot of students will be competing for not too many spots. In addition, this specific profile includes the ranges for the SAT components, the GPA, as well as the ACT scores. So therefore, you can apply those percentiles of where your student is against these ranges and identify whether or not this school would be a reach, a match, or a safety for your student. Even further, this specific profile has some information relative to financial aid, but remember, because you receive financial aid does not mean that it's free money. It does not mean that your full need is met. So you need to have those conversations as we discussed in Module 1, but still, this is great information as a starting point to verify the information that you're looking to confirm. And here is what we were talking about relative to major or specific career interest or academic interest. They have broken out here by interest, the number of students who have applied, the number who were admitted, and the number that were enrolled. This will give you a very good indication of individual competitiveness of one major versus another. Also, if your student is undecided, but has to at some point pick some major or some school within the college to apply to, this could potentially be indicative and directionally help your student to decide between one school or another. Overall, I feel this is a fairly thorough freshman profile. I can't promise you that all will be like that. However, this is what you're looking for. If you can't find it online, by the way, by Googling it or going to the college's website, feel free to contact admissions and ask if they can share that information with you. Next, we're here again at College Board. College Board is something we used in Module 1, and for consistency's sake, I thought we would just stay there. So first off, you could put any college your student is interested in into College Board and into many other websites as well. And over on the right-hand side here, you'll see there's a match of students who also were interested in Northwestern were also interested in these other types of schools. That will give you an indication of schools with potentially similar criteria. Very helpful and could be a good place to find a hidden gem. Now, relative to academics and the academic fit criteria, there's two places we want to look at. One is the majors and learning environment. And this will give us the student to faculty ratio, which this is relatively low. So you can guess that your student will be in smaller classes with more personalized attention potentially. But don't overlook this right here. This is the learning environment we were talking about. Most of the time, most colleges are based on a semester program. However, some schools have a quarter system or a trimester system. And if you don't understand what those are, you should definitely research those. But a quarter system especially is taking less number of classes, but working through the material at a very, very fast pace because the duration of the class is shorter. And you need to know your child and make sure that they are a fast learner, that they're not a procrastinator, and that they can adapt quickly to be able to work well in a quarter type system. Another thing that you should look at is the percent that return their next year. Very, very important. Obviously, the higher the number, the more happy and the better match academically and otherwise that a school is for a student, but you're looking for the best numbers that you can get there. Now, if you look at right now, the tab that's highlighted is the most popular majors. This will give you a good feel, again, not just for the academic offerings, but for the types of students that attend the school. You'll see here, it looks very balanced. Social sciences, communications, but also engineering, biology, mathematics, computer sciences, performing arts. Looks to me, STEM is represented, humanities is represented, as well as specific interests might be represented. So that is a way to try to identify whether or not a school might be a good match based on the interest that your student has. Now, in addition, you can also go to the Applying tab. This has some very good information, some of what we saw on the freshman profile for the other school we looked at, but the total number of applicants, the number admitted, obviously that will tell you how competitive and how selective the college is. In addition, this specific school, it's self-reported, so not every school may have this, and you might need to ask admissions for this, but this school reported early decision. This is how many applications that they received, and this is how many were omitted. You can compare those numbers to the general acceptance rate and see if early decision, if you're in the position to do so, gives you an academic or application advantage. In addition, here we're looking at application requirements. This is where you'll find the testing requirements that are looked at. What's important will give you an idea on a very important, and considered basis as to whether or not an interview is offered, but also the top things and criteria that the college uses to evaluate your student's admissibility. And this is where you can then match your student against those factors and be honest about where they are to see again if the school would be a reach, a match, or a safety. From an academic and GPA perspective, you can compare the classes that they are asking for or requiring against the transcript of your student. Now, please understand, this is not necessarily law. These are usually somewhat flexible. So you don't need to worry that your student doesn't have this or that, or the high school that your child is at doesn't offer this or that. Document those questions, talk to admissions, and understand how they would evaluate your student if it's not an apples to apples comparison. In addition, if you go down here, you can see whether or not the school is going to include, print out, or share the GPA of incoming freshmen. This school has chosen not to, at least through this source, but that doesn't mean that you can't ask the college for it and see if you can get it on their freshman profile. Last, SAT and ACT scores, if they're reported and shared, are going to be in this tab. Here we have the ACT tab highlighted. This is the range of most of their students, and this is the percent that are in each range score category. This way, you can identify again what percentile your student is against this school and identify again if it's a reach, a match, or a safety. They also have the same information for the SAT. So in Module 2, we covered the academic fit factors, both from an acceptance perspective as well as from an academic environment perspective. We're going to show you more in Module 4, additional data sources that you can use. So this is not the be-all, save-all. This is not the only one. And obviously, we could go on and make this a very long program if we went through every single one of those. But we wanted to teach you and show you hands-on specifically the type of information you can be looking at and looking for in order to really get the best information and make sure you're on the right track for building your perfect college list.